Jai Prabhuji. Hello everybody and welcome to the Retroprogressive Yoga Institute. Here we are exploring, inquiring and deepening into our understanding of the books, different writings and video lectures of Prabhuji. In our case, we are studying the book Kundalini Yoga, The Power is in You. In this opportunity, we're going to begin by reading a paragraph that we find in the book, and it's going to give us this wider view about what is this class about. The heart does not pursue goals, it pursues meaning. There is a certain degree of madness in love, as it leaves us without concrete answers to why, what for, or to what end. The heart is brave. It does not pursue safety, comfort, or convenience. Love causes us to expand ourselves before the experience of our soul in the clear sky of our interior. To love is to experience the expansive movement that erases differences and borders, unites hearts and fuses souls. The embrace of love evaporates our exclusive attitude and expands the boundaries of our love for those we hold dear. Besides our family, we start to love our neighborhood, city, nation, world, and the entire universe. Love is humans' most wonderful potential. It is stored in our chests. It is a seed ready to bloom and release its nectareous and intoxicating scent. With this beautiful paragraph from the book, we begin our series of classes on the fourth energy center, which is the Anahata chakra. It's the heart chakra, and as many also call it, it's the chakra of love. And this is exactly the main topic that we're going to be sharing about during our classes on this center, love. We begin our series of classes of the chakras with the Muladhara. We saw that its name means base, support, root. We saw how this is the seat of the Kundalini and from where we start in this chakra system. When the functioning of this center is unbalanced, we feel insecure, we do not find our place in this world. This chakra, the root chakra, is also associated with our ability to feel safe and protected. So if it's working correctly, then we're going to feel this confidence in the universe. We feel that we have the necessary strength to face the different situation that life brings us, and we fight for our survival. The Swadhisthana center, that is related to pleasure, sexuality, and creativity. In those series of classes, we learn where the blind search for pleasure, the sentimentality, and also the permissiveness with our sexuality can lead us. This was one of the most important topics during the series of classes that we have about the Swadhisthana. And we also learn how to deal with it, with this sexuality, seeking of pleasure. We learn how to deal with it through renunciation and sublimation. Another of the things that we explored was what is our alternative, what we can do when we have these inherent forces as human beings. We learned that also in those classes. This is something inherent. It's not something that we can deny or to start to be in conflict with it, but they are inherent. It's natural for us to have these different forces We also learn about the desire in these classes. So for whoever didn't see those classes, it's very interesting how we brought the view of the retroprogressive yoga and what we can do, what is the alternative that we have in relation to these specific forces that we have as human beings. And I can speak a little bit more briefly about it. We saw how the proposition, the invitation is, as usual, to observe, to begin to understand these different inherent forces that we have as human beings, instead of repressing them or rejecting them, using different type of things that are going to mean violence. On the other hand, we want to use ahimsa, not violence, and to understand them, bring awareness, to bring observation, meditation, this observation that we always speak without the intermission of the mind. Then we spoke about the Manipura chakra, which is the third center, and we share how much this center is related to self-esteem, to power, to control, to willpower. We saw that when this center is unbalanced, we feel like victims of circumstances, of the things that are happening around us. When it's overloaded, we can be considered even as narcissistic. We are aggressive, and we can suffer from different disorders related to the control of our impulse. But when this center is balanced, we have what we need in order to be responsible for our lives, to accomplish our goals, and we also enjoy of an agile intellect. We saw how we start to have this steering wheel that we can direct our lives as we want, and also how our true power lies in surrendering it to the divine. How we can move from what we consider control to discipline. We saw how these two terms are commonly misunderstood, and they interchange the meanings of both. We clarify what's the meaning and how we can go from a perspective of control to a real discipline. We spoke in our class of the introduction to the chakras, how we have thousands of chakras, but we mentioned how the most important from all those chakras that we have in our body are 7. Therefore, the fourth, which is the one we are starting to get to know today, it's going to represent a bridge in this system. The first 3 centers are going to be considered gross. They are intimately related to our physical needs. We saw protection, sex, power, and control. And then the last 3 are considered divine. In these are expressed more subtle qualities and related to the transcendental, like communication, intuition, absolute bliss. And only in the 4th center, in the chest area, we connect with the heart and we begin to talk about love, compassion, and not only about receiving, but also to give. We see how in this first 3 center, maybe a more suitable word instead of receiving can be taking, because we are concerned with our needs. We saw in the first one it's just about survival. Only in the second one we start taking the needs of other in consideration, and we can start feeling pleasure. It's not only about survival. In the third one, we can direct ourselves and not be just led blindly by this pursuit of pleasure. And all these qualities are more related to taking and receiving things. And only in this fourth center, we start adding to all this equation the fact of giving. We many times spoke how love is about giving and not only receiving. And I remember we one time read this amazing paragraph that we find in the Ishavasya Upanishad about the one who loves. And this person is happy and is loving by the happiness of the other and not only for what he receives. And hopefully in our next class we can go back to this paragraph. It says that when we have a balanced Anahata, our heart is open, and we're going to find more of these specific phrases that we commonly use. We're going to keep listening to them during this series of classes, as love is fundamental and it's a topic that everybody speaks about. So we're going to keep listening to this type of phrases. Because it's open, then our relationship with ourselves, it's going to be healthy, and therefore also the ones that we have with others. And as I mentioned, because it's the fourth chakra, besides being this bridge, it's going to be like a center of balance between the gross and the subtle, the human and the divine, between the instinct and the intuition. Diseases in the chest area such as asthma, heart attacks, low blood pressure could be a symptom of an imbalance in the center of love. Something else that can happen related to this center is that when in our childhood we did not receive the affection or the love, or our love was rejected, then it is possible that we develop as an adult a blockage in this center. And this is as a response to that lack of attention. We build this protective armor around ourselves, and we do not allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Or in the contrary, our reaction can be opposite. By not receiving the care we needed, we now go around the world overflowing with love. And I'm using these quotes because later we will discover about the definition of love. And in this case, what I'm actually referring to is more what we can call attachment. So this is the type of person that because of giving more than what they have, they end up being sick. They are concentrating their efforts in trying to give to make up this lack that they feel, and in that process they forget about their own needs. So when I earlier said overflowing, it's an expression to try to convey how this process works. But this overflowing, it's coming from a lack. I want to hide, I want to reject this lack that I feel, and I want to try to fulfill it by giving more than what I actually have. And I end up being sick because I don't have this balance between my needs and the needs of others when I'm just focused in giving. I don't have this ability to also receive. We need to have this balance, and this is why we always emphasize the importance of the balance. And in this case, we're speaking about the balance between giving and receiving. In this center also lies the Vishnu Granthi. I don't know if you remember it from our previous classes. These are valves that do not allow the Kundalini to ascend when we're not prepared. So it is protecting us from our spiritual childhood, but it's also preserving our evolution on this path. So in the case of the center that we're speaking about, because we have other granthis, once the Kundalini ascends to this center, it's going to close, and then our progress is maintained. And it is explained in this part that only after the opening of this center we can call ourselves yogi. But before that, we can consider ourselves sadhakas or aspirants. Sadhakas are practitioners of certain path, of certain discipline. So we can see we are in front of this next stage of this next stair in this path that we've been building, and in this system specific of the chakras. And we can another time see how each chakra has its own importance and relevance in the whole path. And we can see how this one is going to be like this bridge. And now we see how only when we actually manage to open, when we receive the blessing of having this center open, is that we only then we can call ourselves yogi. But before that, we're only aspirants in the path of the Kundalini. There is a lot happening in this center, so we're going to get deeper little by little in each of our classes on this series. And as usual, I would like us to take a look to the yantra of this center. 12 nadis are the one originating from this center, and they are going to be represented by the 12 petals. We remember that the nadis, that the petals are representing the amount of nadis that are passing through the chakra itself. In this case, is 12. And they are going to symbolize the qualities of the heart, which are bliss, peace, harmony, love, understanding, sympathy, clarity, purity, unity, compassion, kindness, and forgiveness. So according to Tantra Yoga, the downward pointing triangle is going to represent the femininity, and the one facing upward, it's representing the masculinity. The message behind this star is this balance and harmony between two halves, man and woman, inhalation and exhalation, night and day, life and death. These opposites are in fact complementary, and we perceive conflict everywhere because we think we are made of parts and perceive only parts and not the whole. And I would like to make a small parenthesis here before continuing with the yantra, just to mention that this is the last section of this chapter in regards to the Anahata chakra. It's usually finalizing with an explanation about the yantra, and for me it was very curious and interesting how they are explaining here about this balance and about our view as part and what happens when we see things as whole. And this is something that we spoke when we spoke about the tattvas, and we saw it a few times, how our perception, how our belief is what is not allowing us to see things as they really are. What is as it is, as one of the titles of the books of Prabhuji. And here again, he's closing this chapter, giving us one more time this hint about our perception and how this is the one influencing the way we see life. And now it's speaking about these opposites, or what we call opposites, because they are actually not opposites, but two parts of one thing, two extremes of one thing, and they are complementary, not actually, there is no conflict in between them. And this perception changes once we see ourselves as parts of the whole. We have the mantras in each of the petals of the yantra, which are Kam, Kham, Gam, Gham, Nam, Cham, Cham, Ham, Ham, Nam, Tam, and Tam. The mantra of the chakra, the one that it's in the center, the Vija mantra, is Jam, and the shape of the mandala is an hexagon. Now we can start speaking more about love. We have, and when I was preparing this class, I saw an infinite infinite options, infinite directions where we can take this class to expand about what the center is about. We find the topic of love in, if not all the books, most of the books of Prabhuji. We have it in the Ishavasya, we have it in the Experimenting with the Truth, we have it in What is This, and we are obviously having it in the Bhakti Yoga, which is the path of love. And in previous classes, we share how this path is going to transform our attachment into unconditional love. And I would like us to quote from the back of the book. This is the book. It says that Bhakti Yoga is the path of the heart that sublimates emotion into devotion. So in order for us to understand what this center is about, I want us to concentrate on going deeper on the definition of love. We have the chapter 2 of this book. It's titled Love. And to define love, we will notice something that we learned in our past classes and that goes in harmony with everything we have learned from this path, and is the level of consciousness. This is something that I want us to stay with. If we didn't from the past classes, it's something that I want us to always pay attention to, the level of consciousness, and I would like us to stay with it until the end of this course. And it's something very basic in order to reach a consensus in regards to a definition of love. Or I can say rather, this is a reason that there is no consensus in this definition. We saw it when we had our classes in regards to pleasure. We took a video conference where Prabhuji is talking about happiness, and he explained the different levels of what we call happiness and how it was not possible to reach an established definition of what is happiness because it belongs to the subjective platform. It's going to depend on the subject, on the person that is defining it, and the level of consciousness of the person. So when we talk about love, when we talk about something that belongs to that subjective level and that is going to be intimately connected to the level of evolution of the person that we are, that is defining is, then in the same level we find what we just talked about, happiness. In happiness, he was explaining us that we have a physical level that is translated as pleasure. Then we have the one that goes after was joy, that it's higher, but it depends on something external from the others. Then we had happiness, which is more born from ourselves. It's not so much related to something external, but it comes from us, it's blooming from us. And then finally we had the absolute bliss, which is Ananda, one of these names of the divinity. We have Sat, Chit, Ananda, which is existence, consciousness, and bliss. And we saw how bliss is divinity, what we really are. And it's going to overcome this dual platform where there is an object and a subject that is experiencing certain sensation. But in bliss, in Ananda, there is a fusion, there is an integration, and this subject and object it's disappearing when there is actual bliss. So by mentioning this, I just wanted to give us as a reminder, whoever didn't see this class is very recommended, and I will leave some links if someone is interested in watching them. I recommend to watch the actual conference from Prabhuji, which I find it a master class in the topic of happiness. If somebody is interested in this topic, then I recommend also to go to this class, and I can also leave links to it. So I just wanted to mention it, and I brought it as a reminder of how this level of consciousness is going to influence so much in the definition that we're going to give in regards to these different topics that are part of this subjective level, subjective platform. It's going to depend on us and in our level of consciousness. And in the case of happiness, we saw how it will be either pleasure, like when I'm identified with my body, it's pleasure. When I am identified more with my emotions, then it's going to be joy, and continue. So we are going to see a very similar process when we're talking about love. And I would like to, before going into the definition, I would like to share about the introduction of the book. So we have like a greater context of where we're taking this definition. And here he's talking about how love is such a popular topic. There are love poems, love songs, and it's a very relevant topic in our day-to-day life. I don't remember any day that I didn't think about love or speak about it, thanks God. But I think it's something very relevant to everybody. Like it's something that it's very common and that we spend a quantity of time just thinking about this topic. But he's saying that even though it's very relevant, there are very few that have experienced love. Very few have loved. And usually what we want is to be loved. We seek love. And that is why we focus in love. We concentrate on being worthy of being loved, and then our effort is directed to show and to cultivate certain qualities, both physically and psychologically, in order to be attractive to the other, and thus win that love that we seek so much, that we want so much. But on the contrary, for the Bhakti Yogi, this practitioner of the path of love, the love is more related to our ability to love. So it's not what we just spoke about, what is common in our society, that I want to be loved. And very soon we're going to understand why. But in the vision of the Bhakti Yogi, is not the love that we have been learning from our childhood, this love from the telenovelas, but it is a love that is going to reflect a state of the soul. It is, as I mentioned before, about bliss, what is real in us. And we can read something from the book that says, Bhakti is the purest and most elevated love. It arises from the depths of consciousness and the peace of silence, of meditation. When we experience this love, we discover that it's not an emotion or a feeling, but what is real within us. We have often shared how in this path of Kundalini Yoga, we follow certain steps to prepare ourselves as instruments, and in the same way, to be able to love, Bhakti Yoga offers us a system to develop the qualities to prepare the necessary conditions to love. And I would like us to read another paragraph that is going to tell us that many believe that we have to surrender to God to know His love. However, Bhakti Yoga teaches that abandoning oneself to love is the only possibility to know divinity, because only by offering our heart, heaven can take hold of it and make it its own. We have spoken about renunciation, power, how our true power resides in surrendering it to the divine. What is what we can actually surrender? And here it's telling us how there is this misconception that to meet, that in order to know the love of God, we have to surrender to Him. And it is important in this part that we pay attention to the words that we're using: to meet, to know, and to love. And Bhakti Yoga is going to tell us, no, abandon yourself in love, in this madness. And I think that not in vain, when someone is considered crazy, they say, no, it's that he is in love, that she is in love, as if love justifies that madness that the person is going through. So as we continue to assemble this beautiful puzzle about this path and the vision of the retroprogressive path, a retroprogressive message, then we have that first surrender, love, and from that love you can actually know divinity. Because later also it is explained how our thoughts and opinions about what love is are going to represent an obstacle in order to experience it, because to love you actually have to transcend the mind. To actually love, you have to transcend the mind. And that is exactly why when we're speaking about meditating, observing, we also make the same proposition. True meditation happens when there is no interference of the mind. And it's going to be the same case when loving. Bhakti Yoga not only teaches us to love, but also to systematically go mad, as true reason resides in divine insanity. From this path perspective, it is absurd to think we can understand love. The only sane thing is simply to love. And while I was reading these words, I'm just remembering something that we find in the chapter of the master-disciple relationship in the book Experimenting with the Truth, where Prabhuji is explaining that there are certain things in life that were not made to be understood, but to be lived. And that we're going to miss the point if we try to understand them. And I'm sure that all of you, or most of you, know that there are things that, you need to live them. It's not the same when understanding something intellectually, but when you go through it. And I think we can all agree that there are certain things that are meant to be lived, and as Prabhuji said, not to be passed through this filter of logic, through this filter of the mind. And I think he's speaking about something very similar when he's speaking about love and the system of Bhakti Yoga that is preparing us to be mad and to know God actually by loving and not in the opposite way. So after these words, I think we can move to the second chapter, where we are going to start sharing about the definition of love. As I mentioned, the name of this chapter is Love. And I wanted to bring a little bit more of context. The first chapter is talking about Bhakti, and then we have the love. So what I wanted to set is the fact that these are the first topics that we need to set in the table in order to understand all the path of the Bhakti Yoga. And I'm bringing it here because actually even in the book We are bringing this as a support to understand what we're speaking about when we're speaking about the fourth center, the Anahata chakra, but it is actually even recommended in order to open this center, the practice of Bhakti Yoga. I'm going to bring it next class exactly where we find it in the book, but we can see how connected it is to this center and why we're bringing it to enrich our classes in regards to this specific center, the Anahata chakra. So he begins this chapter about love with a very beautiful comparison between what is attachment and what is love. Because the common thing is that we confuse attachment with love. And we do it with reason, because even the demonstration of both are very, very similar. And we have an immense interest towards the object or the person that we love or we are attached. But then the intention is different. And here Prabhuji is comparing the slaughterhouse operators and the animal protection organization. They both have interest in the animals, but their intention is opposite. One is to kill them, one is to protect them. So this is how we can come to this great confusion between these two terms. One is going to enslave us to what or who we are attached. We want to control that person or that thing. We want to possess them. And in the end, as we saw in previous classes when we spoke about addictions and control and this seeking of pleasure, we are the ones that become obsessed, and after becoming even addictive to the thing or to the person, we are the control ones. So this is what's happening with attachment. We are the ones that are being possessed, and we are the ones that end up being controlled by that thing, when our initial intention was to control the thing or to control the person. Then we end up being the ones controlled. So this is the direction where attachment can take us. However, love, it's liberating. And as we mentioned, with the surrender, we are the ones that are possessed. And in this case, in this path, we are going to be possessed by the divine. We are the ones longing for this dissolution of ourselves in the whole. And in this process, we realize that we are love. In this process of developing these qualities and these different traits in order to develop this capacity, then we realize that we are love. The more we love, the more conscious we become. The more intense our love, the clearer our vision. Just as when we talked about the Kundalini that can work as a thermometer that is determining our level of consciousness, then in the same way, our capacity to love is going to allow us greater clarity. We spoke how we can also imagine this Kundalini like in a very high building. And the more we elevate ourselves, then the more we can see, the wider is our view. We can see better. And it's the same that is happening when we speak about love. Now we can move to those different levels of love, and remember that we compare it to when we talk about these levels of happiness. As in the same way, it seems that when we ask someone, what is love? You can think that, okay, these persons are talking about completely different topics, but let's remember that this is due to our perception, our level of consciousness, in which level we are, and then our definition is going to come from that place. So, as in the happiness, we start with physical love. And as its name says, it is when we identify ourselves with the body. And then our love is going to be expressed as sexual appetite or lustful desire. I'm not sure if someone had this experience, but there are different couples, or maybe you had a partner where their expression of love was sex. This is their, now I see many things that say my love language. Yeah, for many people, this is their love language. This is the most elemental level of love, but this is the way that they express their love through sex. Then we have what we call sentimental love. And people at this level identify with their emotions. They feel love in their heart, and this is what we call earlier attachment, this so-called love, because it is temporary and it has the potential to become one day as hate. Emotions, we know that they are temporary. 1 minute I'm feeling one way, the minute after I'm feeling in another way. So in the same way, when this so-called love, it's coming from this emotional level, it's very fragile. It can at any time turn to hate. And it's usually coming from these romantic fantasies that society has imposed on us with these different telenovelas, these different stories where there is always a happy ending. And we come to the relationship with this notion, with this expectation that everything is going to be pink and happy endings, and the way that we learn that it's supposed to be. And then we face the reality that it's not like that. It's not how we expect it. And this is when things can turn into hate. Then we have the intellectual love that happens more from the mind, intellectual love. So it's going to be more theoretical. Is this type of person that is dreaming with the Prince Charming or this eternal love. And it's coming from this part of the mind that we call buddhi, the intellect. So we've seen in previous classes how this part of the mind has the capacity to evaluate, to judge, to discriminate. It's a very important part of the mind. But in this case, when the love is coming from there, then it's going to be more a business. It's going to be more a transaction where if you give me, I give you. It's the type of this love that we call reciprocation. So I am more interested in knowing how much you're going to give me to know how much I'm going to give you. And it's explained in this part of the book how they find themselves, the persons that form a couple like this, both with empty hands and trying to seek, then they both remain. They found each other with empty hand. When both of them are seeking to receive or to take, then there is no possibility than when you actually want to grow together. Both are coming from a place of let's learn and let's enrich each other. Then I am coming from this place of need and I just want to take or receive. From the intellectual love, we go to devotional love. And after the devotional love, we have the transcendental love. So devotional love is like the first stage in order to reach this transcendental love. And it's explained to us how at the beginning of this process, in this stage of devotional love, we need to ascribe qualities to the Absolute in order to be able to be attached to it. And listen, I'm using the word attach because it's not love yet. Attachment still belongs to this dual platform of subject and object, and we need an expression of the divine in this platform in order to begin to develop a relationship with it. And this is why we have the deities, we have songs, we have mantras, we have different hymns. And all these are tools in order to help us to cultivate what will later become transcendental love. So we go from worldly attachment to devotional attachment, and then finally to what we can call love. The path of love begins at our identification with body and mind and ends in the experience of the spirit. It sets sail from the relative and disembarks upon the absolute. It goes from man and arrives at God. To get attached is human, and to love is divine. God is love, and since we are an integral part of divinity, love is our nature, the very essence of who we are. Love is as vital to the soul as breath is to the body. Our innate need for love is proof that the divine spark dwells within us. Directing our love to the world of names and forms is as futile as trying to quench our thirst by dipping our hands or feet in water. Only when we direct our love to its origin will it rain down upon everything and everyone. So in this part we can see a small glimpse of what transcendental love is, which is the next stage. And I want us to stay with what we just read because it's giving us the direction. It's telling us from human attachment to divine attachment and then to transcendental love. And we're going to know very soon what transcendental love is. But I also connect this that we just read with when we were speaking about renunciation, and we spoke about how when there is a higher taste, then it's so easy to give up these worldly attachments. And I feel it's very similar here. Also when it's speaking about the roots, when we want to direct our love to something mundane, it's like trying to fulfill our thirst with something that doesn't even exist. But when we actually are watering the roots, this love can actually grow, and it's going obviously to, or not obviously, but it's going to fulfill our real thirst for love. So before we continue speaking about it, I want us to read what we find also in the book about transcendental love, and we are finalizing with our class of today, and we're going to continue deepening in our next class. So in regards to transcendental love, we find in the book that says, Bhakti Yoga starts with selfish attachment or love for the mundane. Then it goes through devotional attachment, which is love for God as a separate entity. Finally, it culminates in transcendental love, where divisions between the lover and loved one vanish. So as we saw with what we just read, is a continuation of what we explained in regards to devotional love and all the different levels of love. From this mundane attachment, we pass to devotional attachment to God. There is a relationship, but then in the transcendental love, there is no relationship. It's like we vanished into God. There is no separation. There is no subject-object. There is not someone that loved and the loved one, but this barrier that exists in the devotional love disappears, and we realized ourselves, as we spoke earlier, as a love, or we can call it bliss also, this Ananda that we spoke earlier. And this is something that we will continue to see in this path of the Kundalini, how when there is this elevation, this ascension of the Kundalini until the Sahasrara chakra, from the Muladhara, the Kundalini, the Shakti elevates and unites. So it's Shakti with Shiva, they unite, there is a fusion, and then all the separation disappears, it vanishes. And this is what we're speaking about when we spoke about this transcendental love. We realize ourselves as what we really are, as an integral part of the whole. And in the book is also speaking about how there is this process, there is this elevation in our view of reality, and we are no longer inclined to mundane love, but we start finding this higher taste in the divine, in what we really are. And it's telling us how this is really our thirst to reconnect to the whole, this call that we many times feel to reunite and to dwell, like many times we're just speaking about the drop, dwelling in the ocean, in what we really are. And I feel it's very much connected to what we're speaking about here, what I just share about this process of the Shakti and Shiva connecting, and what we've been sharing about in this whole path of the Kundalini Yoga. So I want us to go listening to some words of Prabhuji. There is a video conferences in Spanish, so I'm going to add subtitles, where he's speaking about unconditional love. And he's sharing about this very famous phrase in Hebrew is Ve'ahavta lereaja kamoja. And then I know it by heart in Spanish, amarás a tu prójimo como a ti mismo. And in English is to love your neighbor as yourself. I think this is the way it's usually translated. And what he's saying, first of all, is explaining the issue of the translation, how many times we are in contact with different sacred scriptures, and it's an issue to enter to the depths of the meaning of them when we don't know the original language in which they were brought. And he's explaining the differences between the translation that we have and what the actual phrase comes to tell us. So after he's doing this explanation, then he's bringing us the meaning of the phrase and how it's possible to actually cultivate this unconditional love. And I will leave you with some of these. Thank you so much for joining us today. In our next class, we're going to continue deepening into this beautiful topic of love. Jai Prabhuji.
No somos solo este condicionamiento, no somos solo una mente o un movimiento mental. No somos un yo alrededor del cual giran expectativas, esperanzas, miedos. No. Si damos, tal y como dice el budismo zen, un paso atrás, solo un paso, veremos que hay percepción, conciencia. Y cuidado que no digo un perceptor. No hay nadie. Aquí no hay nadie. En eso consiste el ego, en eso consiste el sueño, creer que hay algo o alguien. No hay nadie, hay una percepción. Observación. Esta observación puede ser percibida muy fácilmente. Tú ves que miras, ves formas, puedes escuchar ruidos, hay percepción, tacto, olfato, percibes. Hay una percepción que ocurre constantemente. Dicha percepción está presente constantemente, incluso mientras duermes. Hay una percepción de tus sueños y por ende sueñas. Esta percepción es absoluta, es una, sin un segundo. Es decir, es una y la misma. La diferencia entre nosotros son de condicionamientos, de historias que hemos pasado en la vida, que han creado un determinado tipo de condicionamiento, pero cuando das un paso atrás, como percepción, somos uno y lo mismo, indiferenciado, no dual como la mente. El sueño es dual. El sueño tiene alto y bajo, oscuro y claro, bueno y malo, correcto e incorrecto. La conciencia es lo uno sin segundo. Esta conciencia tiene movimiento, sin mover tus ojos, sin mover tu cuerpo, sin moverte, estático. Puedes dirigirla al techo y prestar atención al techo o al piso. Puedes dirigirla hacia un sonido lejano o hacia lo más cercano y sentir la respiración en tus fosas nasales. Puedes expandirla hacia la periferia hasta sentir el universo entero. O puedes enfocarla en el más pequeñito punto. Puede ser esta enfocada. Nadie la enfoca, nadie la dirige. Es la percepción misma, viva, inteligente. Es inteligencia. Ni siquiera es consciente, sino que es conciencia misma. Presta atención porque es una gran diferencia. No es un ser consciente, es la conciencia misma. Y lo más importante, como dice el Vedanta, Tattvamasi, eso eres tú. Esa es tu auténtica naturaleza. Es tu eterna realidad, o lo que realmente eres. Y es uno porque es la misma naturaleza que se encuentra detrás de todo y todos en esta realidad de nombres y formas. Mientras no te ames a ti mismo, no serás capaz de amar a los demás, porque mientras no reconozcas en ti, en lo profundo, tu realidad, no serás capaz de reconocerla en el prójimo. Cultivar el amor incondicional es buscar el reconocimiento de tu auténtica naturaleza. Al momento de reconocerla, de inmediato te darás cuenta que la base, la esencia misma de lo que eres, es la base y la esencia del prójimo. Solo entonces serás capaz de no sentir amor, descubrirte como el amor. Se dice que Dios es amor, ¿no? Realizarás que el amor es divino. Y realizarás que ese amor es la esencia misma de toda criatura viviente. Amarás a todo y a todos. Obviamente, los condicionamientos a veces pueden ser sumamente complicados. Evitarás ciertos contactos, ciertas asociaciones, pero amarás. Solo entonces serás capaz de amar sin condiciones, porque ya no importará el condicionamiento del prójimo. Aprendes que yo no soy lo que pienso, no soy lo que siento o lo que creo, incluso no soy mis acciones o mis palabras, no soy lo que tengo. Tengo pensamientos, tengo ideas, tengo sensaciones, sino que yo soy lo que soy. Y asimismo, me amo lo que soy. Y quizás por primera vez te relaciones con el prójimo diferenciando que su modo de actuar, de pensar, de sentir, no es él, sino que el otro lo valorizo y lo puedo amar por lo que es. Y en esta vida, lo único que realmente es Dios. La conciencia, la percepción, la observación.